excessive effort. You have to compromise your time, your effort for your country's goals in order to achieve such kind of global objectives. That is one. Secondly, whenever international negotiations are carried out, the leadership has to have clout and the weight. When I talk about clout and weight, it comes from the economic might, from the military might, from the legacy of having accomplished or at least asserted one's authority for a long time. That India has a long way to go, unfortunately. We are just about 4.19 trillion economy. We are ambitious. We want to become a global power by 2047. We have miles to go before we sleep in order to make sure that our people don't go hungry. People who are below the poverty line are lifted up permanently. Our per capita income goes up from 2,800 US dollar in terms of PPP to 14,000 to 20,000 US dollar. Only then we can become a global economy. Our literacy rate has improved significantly from, let's say, 17-18% at the time of independence to 76%. We need to close in as high as possible to 90, maybe 100%. We have medical care. We have, roti, kapda, makan. Then came the road and pani, bijli, and thereafter the digital platforms have come in a big way. We have a long way to go. We have lots of milestones to be achieved within our country, and therefore I would strongly recommend not to go in for international negotiations or mediation of peace and normalcy in situations obtaining in Middle East. It's a very complex, very complicated situation. You make a commitment today, within hours it is flouted like it is happening now. Nobody is listening to Donald Trump, will listen to India. It's a pragmatic response I have given for whatever penny is worth, Kriti, and I hope you will take it in the spirit in which I have conveyed. Yes, so,
Of course.
he enjoys the credibility, the international credibility about Narendra Modi and India. India as a nation, we keep quiet on issues which are turbulent. We don't unnecessarily, violate the principles of diplomacy and dialogue. Okay, it's a very mature state. We have learned it's a civilizational value system which has been passed on to the present dispensation. And the country has come a long way after independence. Everyone thought in the Western Hemisphere that we are going to last not more than 24 hours as a democracy. We have been a successful and largest democracy for past 78 years.
Well,
So
Sudhakarji, for now, Prime Minister Modi has only affirmed his support for the Gaza peace plan. So we don't know what ambitions he has in resolving the wars. But thank you for your comment there, and I do see your point. With that, viewers, we move on. Thank you, Sudhakarji, for joining us. Viewers, there's news from Morocco where at least 22 people were killed and 16 others injured overnight when two adjoining buildings collapsed in Fez, one of the oldest cities of Morocco. Moroccan authorities said that one of the structures was unoccupied, while the second was hosting an Akika, a traditional Muslim celebration marking the birth of a child, when it suddenly caved in, trapping dozens of people inside. Rescue teams worked through the night, pulling survivors and bodies from the rubble. Officials warned that the death toll remains preliminary as emergency crews continue to search for missing people and assess the damage. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. The US and Japan have conducted joint air exercises, saying the drills show their resolve to deter any forceful change to the status quo after recent Chinese and Russian patrols. Both militaries say the training confirms their readiness and strong defense coordination. The US has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off Venezuela, President Trump says, a move that also pushed global oil prices higher. Washington frames the operation as part of its broader pressure campaign on President Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela denounces the seizure as blatant theft and international piracy, saying the US had no legal basis for the action. Caracas argues the operation is a hostile provocation that violates its sovereign rights. Nobel Peace Laureate and Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado appears in public for the very first time in 11 months, greeting supporters from a hotel balcony in Oslo. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in absentia after arriving too late for the ceremony. Renewed clashes erupt along the Cambodia-Thailand border, with heavy fighting reported near ancient temples ahead of a planned call from President Trump. Both sides remain locked in conflict as expectations rise that Washington may try to broker another peace deal. Amnesty International says Hamas and other Palestinian groups committed crimes against humanity during and after the October the 7th attack. The report says the group also continued violations through its treatment of hostages and withholding of bodies. President Trump says he's concerned Ukraine hasn't had an election in a long time, adding further pressure on President Volodymyr Zelensky. His remarks come as Washington continues to scrutinize Kyiv's political and security situation. President Trump says the announcement of which world leaders will serve on the Gaza Board of Peace should come early next year. He says several leaders are seeking a role on the body, which was created under his plan that established a fragile Israel-Hamas ceasefire. Okay, we start this hour in Europe, and Russia has reported a major aerial attack by Ukraine, with at least 287 drones downed over several regions, including Moscow. The Russian Defense Ministry said 40 drones were shot down over the Moscow region, home to 22 million people. Although the full extent of the damage is unclear, flights at Moscow's major airports have been diverted. The attack comes as tensions rise between the two nations, with Ukraine targeting Russian infrastructure. including oil refineries and tankers. War insurance costs for ships in the Black Sea have also surged as the conflict extends into critical sea lanes. Okay, now joining us is Professor Georgy Toleraya. He's a professor at the Russian Academy of Science, joining us live from the Russian capital of Moscow. Professor Toleraya, you join us from the capital, as we've said. What is the feeling like in the capital after such a huge barrage from the Ukrainian army? 247 drones, over 20 of which was in Moscow. Flights have obviously been diverted. When something like this happens, which of course has been a repeated occurrence, what is the feeling in the city?
Well, of course, this is a bit of a record. This is unprecedented, but unfortunately, the people got used to it because almost every night when you lie down to sleep, you don't know whether you are awake or not. And the drones attacks have been constant, and casually we hear the explosions when the drones are downed. And I've heard the stories from my friends that there were lots of explosions heard that night, and in some places the drones have in fact fallen down, or at least their debris, and caused some damage, which is now being investigated and assessed. So unfortunately, this is nothing new, although maybe the scale of this tonight's event is a little bit bigger than usual. Well, I think that's that unfortunately has become a part of life, and there's no sort of panic, but it's of course it's very unpleasant and very the situation is, the mood is not so Christmas-like.
Yes, indeed, and drone surges have become all too common. What is your analysis of this new modern war? Of course, the war has developed into aerial barrages cross-border now on a very frequent basis. How do these aerial strikes benefit each side?
Well, I would say that at least in Russia, we had the tradition of good air defense from the times of the First, Second World War, the Great Patriotic War against the Germans, as you know. And then during the Cold War, the system to protect several areas, important areas, especially the capital area, was created. It was aimed mostly against the incoming ballistic missiles and planes, but it's been swiftly modernized now to address the drone danger, of course. So, in fact, Moscow is in a better position than any other capital in most parts of the world. And we know that this is quite an imminent danger, and that the drones can bring a lot of harm unless they're downed. But I would imagine that the damage to any other like European capital or European city would be much worse in case they would face a drone attack from an enemy. Russia is in a privileged position in this sense. This is quite a new development. This is quite a new war. I'm no military expert, but mostly in the front line and in the rear. Also, the drones became the major means of attack and means of engagement. If we speak about this particular episode, tonight's episode, I said that shows the despair of the ruling junta in Kiev, the Kiev regime, because they're trying to inflict as much damage to the civil population as possible, especially to the Moscow population, where the politicians and chief cultural figures and civilian figures are concentrated. They hope that Russia that will break the Russian patience and Russia would retaliate in kind, in a really strong and harsh manner. Maybe attacking Kiev and maybe attacking the what we call the centers of decision making. The government and the leading
Yes.
political installation, which we haven't been doing, and they want to get this in order to get some support from the West to continue war. That's how I see the cause for these current events.
Yes, Professor Toleraya, do stay with us as we have further diplomatic updates this time. US President Donald Trump's peace plan for Ukraine reportedly includes controversial proposals to restore Russian energy flows to Europe and major US investment in Russian rare earths and energy sectors. The report says the plan, shared with European leaders, suggests tapping into $200 billion of frozen Russian sovereign assets to fund reconstruction projects in Ukraine. It also includes plans for US companies to invest in Russian sectors like rare earth extraction and Arctic oil drilling. Some European officials have compared the proposed deals to the 1945 Yalta Conference, which divided post-war Europe. Professor Toleraya, what do you think of that comparison? Some European officials comparing it to the 1945 Yalta Conference.
That may be an overstatement, but anyway, it suggests some rational approach on the part of President Trump, because what he suggests is business, and it's good for everyone to stop the war and start the business, and it's a really great market and great opportunities. So I don't know the official reaction to these ideas, but I think that it's quite sound.
Okay, Professor Toleraya, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for taking the time. We now move over to South Asia for our next story, and Bangladesh is set for its first national election since Sheikh Hasina's exit, with the election commissioning announcing the poll date today at 6 p.m. during a nationwide broadcast. The announcement will also address a planned referendum on sweeping state reforms. Since August 2024, and the uprising that occurred in it, and the subsequent fall of Hasina's government, the country has been under an interim authority led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus. The reforms outlined in the July Charter aim to reshape state institutions, limit executive power, and strengthen judicial independence. The upcoming vote in early 2026 has sparked political debate, with Khaleda Zia's Bangladesh Nationalist Party emerging as a leading contender, while Hasina's Awami League is barred from contesting under the current arrangement. Okay, of course, this follows Sheikh Hasina's ousting in 2024 and then her subsequent trial, which led to her being sentenced to death. Bangladeshis will know when they go to the polls today at 6 p.m. Bangladesh time. Of course, it's a huge moment for a newly democratic Bangladesh. With the Awami League barred from running Sheikh Hasina's party, the Awami League will not be on the ballot paper, despite its huge popularity still in the country. Of course, the upcoming vote in early 2026 has sparked this political debate, with Khaleda Zia's Bangladesh National Party emerging as the leading contender. Prashanta Kumar Shil joins us. He's a political commentator. He joins us live from Dhaka. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, Prashanta. A huge day It's been a long time since Bangladesh has seen an election. What is the feeling in the capital of Bangladesh today, all gearing up for that 6 p.m. announcement of when those elections will be held?
Yes, it's a very positions to one to people very exciting after the 5th August. You know that after the 5th August, from former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is in exile now in India. So there is some political dividedness from between Awami League, BMP, Jamaat, and so lots of stakeholder in come in front of the in absence of Bangladesh Awami League, that is called Sheikh Hasina's party. So we see that there is some actually it's a call a pillow passing game in our political situation the present time, because you know that in Bangladesh the two binary party, the major parties, one is Awami League and one another is BMP. But we see that there's a lots of organization in front of the in name of election in Bangladesh. There's so some of the already they have in just one center that some of the just only ban and nothing else. So we know that they haven't what the impact they are imposed in the next election. That is one kind of issues. And another issues, you know that the who are the doing the that kind of movement from the 5th August revelations, call it the July revelation. That in student-led, you know that they are the student are here from in front of that. They haven't already reformed a party that's called in NCP, that is in called in National Citizen Party. So all of the happening, they are just all are the one to the doing the center of the power. So people are just seeing to that what is happening the next few of couple of month, what the Bangladesh politics at all, the total scenario is there is in conflict, is there is in some volatile issues again. So there is in some issues, and this is very very honestly true. You know that the if you can ensure the from fair and free and credible election. You know that the Awami League is a very good stakeholder, and they have so lots of vote bank for that. So if you are just in a vote from Awami League, it's very tough from critical. It's not a fair attending and never the cost. And another issues you have to remind that after the 5th August, that is scenario is the same. But now after 1 year, you know that the political parties, especially in Jamaat, BMP and NCP, they haven't just come on past one another some several issues, topics. They have in conflict already in here in both narratives, because they all are want to go straight in the power. So that is in one kind of extreme situation. And now, so we are just waiting to see what is happening the next election. You know that the election commission declared the announcement for from both date. There is an Colin Tafsil from last from this week or today. I don't know what time they have declared, but there isn't some issues in happening from Bangladesh. In the next time, there isn't from we have an observation, and politically there is some clash and anti-clash, because you can see that the vote scenario in Bangladesh is not very good enough. The ground level reality is so much brutal, so much intolerable, intrustable from separate and different issues. So we are just want to seeking what is happening the next, what the condition is that, and also we have to see the Begum Khaleda Jia. You know that one of the
Yes.
most senior for that. From we haven't just waiting to see what is happening the next.
Prashanta Kumar Shil, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We will, of course, be waiting for that 6 p.m. announcement here on NewsX World and bring it straight to our viewers. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. We now move on, and Amnesty International has accused Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups of committing crimes against humanity during and after the October the 7th attacks in Israel. The human rights watchdog says the attacks, which killed over 1,200 civilians and took 251 hostages, amount to extermination, listing acts including murder, imprisonment, torture and sexual violence. Amnesty reports that Hamas, along with its armed wing, the Ezzadin al-Qassam brigades, led these crimes, while allies such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades were responsible to a lesser extent. The organisation also criticises Hamas for mistreating hostages and withholding bodies. The report comes amid ongoing controversy, as Amnesty has also accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, which is a claim that Israel strongly denies. The International Criminal Court previously issued arrest warrants for Hamas leaders, though many were later killed. The situation highlights the deep humanitarian and legal crises stemming from the war in Gaza. Joining us now is Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. Amnesty International, of course, condemning and Hamas crimes, accuses it of crimes against humanity, but also accuses Israel of genocide. What is the weight behind the organisation that is Amnesty International, and will it be taken seriously by either Hamas or Israel?
Thomas, it's very good to see you. There are three principal accusations that Amnesty International is making. One is that the Palestinian armed groups, or what we call terrorist groups, committed violations of international humanitarian law, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. They also allege that while the hostages were in custody of these threat groups, that they were mistreated and maltreated. Now, to answer your question, Amnesty International is the most respected, most reputed organization, together with Human Rights Watch. On some occasions, both these groups, both these entities have made statements that have been questioned, but largely they are considered very credible because they're based on research, they're based on documentation. In this case, there's a comprehensive 173-page report which they have released, and that is publicly available. So I believe that until now, human rights groups have accused Israel, but for the first time, very comprehensive report by a human rights organization accusing Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and other groups, other entities, because there were a total of 9 entities that attacked Israel on that day, accusing them of committing these 3 different forms of crimes.
Yeah, and as you say, Professor Gunaratne, some critics say Amnesty International has been inconsistent in its reports, in its findings, etc., accusing Hamas of crimes against humanity, but also accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. Do you think this damages the organization's reputation, or does it show impartiality here?
Certainly, it demonstrates that Amnesty is able to criticize both Israel and also the threat groups, the Palestinian threat groups. And I think that these are accusations, so people will have to look at the evidence and make a decision whether Israel committed genocide and whether Palestinian groups violated the international humanitarian law, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So what is important is that these allegations and accusations will have to be produced before a court of law for them to reach a conclusion.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you here on NewsX World. We now move on and over to Australia, where Prime Minister Anthony Albanese visited a Canberra school to speak with students a day after a world-first social media ban on under-16s went live, acknowledging that some young people were still managing to stay online. Under the law, 10 of the biggest platforms, including TikTok, Meta, Instagram and YouTube, must bar underage users or face fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars. The government says the systems will enforce this and it will take time to stabilise. Albanese said teens bragging about remaining online are only making it easier for platforms to identify and remove them. He insisted the ban will improve safety and even lead to better classroom behaviour. The move is being closely watched globally, with several countries considering similar restrictions. Meanwhile, VPN searches in Australia have surged as young users tried to bypass the ban. Let's listen in.
We know that social media is causing social harm. And one of the issues that I as Prime Minister get all the time is asked about questions of national security. There is nothing more important than keeping our young Australians safe now and into the future. And what this will do is make sure that parents are empowered, that teachers can have those discussions, that we actually have that personal interaction as we go forward to keep our children safe and to give parents greater peace of mind as well.
We have had huge global interest in how we are delivering a law that is not just, I think, a moral imperative, one of the defining issues of our time, but a law that is novel, complex, innovative. So there's been a huge amount of global interest and we welcome it.
We now move on once again, and the Federal Reserve in the United States has cut interest rates in another divided vote, but signalled it will likely pause further reductions in borrowing costs as the US central bank looks for clearer signals about the direction of the job market and inflation that remains elevated. The Fed's benchmark rate stands between 3.5% and 3.75%. That figure marks a significant drop from a recent peak attained in 2023, but borrowing costs remain well above a 0% rate established at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking at a press conference in Washington, Fed Chair Jerome Powell touted the rate cut as an effort to improve the labour market, but he suggested the central bank may be cautious about further rate reductions. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump has said that the Federal Reserve could have at least doubled their rate cut. Let's in fact listen in to what the two have said.
Conditions in the labor market appear to be gradually cooling, and inflation remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, in light of the balance of risks to employment and inflation, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by a 1/4 percentage point. As a separate matter, we also decided to initiate purchases of shorter-term Treasury securities solely for the purpose of maintaining an ample supply of reserves over time, thus supporting effective control of our policy rate.
The head of the Federal Reserve is a stiff, and you fight that. It's amazing. We fight that, and yet interest rates are going down, except with him, not too much. He did a rather, I would say, a rather small number that could have been doubled, at least doubled. And that's the other thing. I think the rates for the United States are always the lowest in the world, because without us, there is no world.
US tech giants are under growing pressure over the risks posed by artificial intelligence chatbots. A bipartisan group of state attorneys generals have issued warnings to Microsoft, Meta, Google and Apple, along with 9 other companies, accusing their AI tools of producing delusional outputs that could violate state laws. The letter claims the systems can encourage user delusions and worsen mental health risks, especially for children. It cites reports of a teenager who discussed a suicide plan with a chatbot. The Attorney General's wants independent audits of these AI models and say federal and state regulators must be allowed to review them. Meanwhile, states continue to clash with Washington as the Trump administration pushes to block states from setting their own AI rules, an effort that bipartisan leaders across the country are urging Congress to reject. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. The US has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off Venezuela, President Trump has said, a move that also pushed global oil prices higher. Washington frames the operation as part of its broader pressure campaign on President Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela denounces the seizure as blatant theft and international piracy, saying the US had no legal basis for the action. Caracas argues the operation is a hostile provocation that violates its sovereign rights. Nobel Peace Laureate and Venezuelan opposition figure Marina Corina Machado appears in public for the first time in 11 months, greeting supporters from a hotel balcony in Oslo. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in absentia after arriving too late for the ceremony, having been in hiding since protesting Maduro's inauguration. Renewed clashes erupt along the Cambodia-Thailand border, with heavy fighting reported near ancient temples ahead of a planned call from President Trump. Both sides remain locked in conflict as expectations rise that Washington may try to broker another ceasefire. Amnesty International says Hamas and other Palestinian groups committed crimes against humanity during and after the October 7, 2023 attack in southern Israel. The report says the group also continued violations through its treatment of hostages and withholding of bodies. President Trump says he's concerned Ukraine hasn't had an election in a long time, adding further pressure on President Volodymyr Zelensky. His remarks come as Washington continues to scrutinize Kiev's political and security situation. President Trump says the announcement of which world leaders will serve on the Gaza Board of Peace should come early next year. He says several leaders are seeking a role on the body, which was created under his plan that established a fragile Israel-Hamas ceasefire. President Trump launches a fast-track US visa scheme for foreigners who pay at least $1 million, promising a direct path to citizenship for qualified buyers. The move comes as Washington tightens immigration rules, raises work visa fees, and steps up deportations. Now for our top story, we start with Europe's defining crisis, the Russia-Ukraine war. US President Donald Trump held a discussion with European leaders over the ongoing war in Ukraine. On the call with British, French and German leaders, Trump said they had pretty strong words on the situation. Trump also warned that new Ukraine meetings risk wasting time. Let's in fact listen in to what the US President had to say.
The leaders of France, we spoke to, and Germany, and UK, all very good leaders, very good friends of mine, and we discussed Ukraine in pretty strong words, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll wait.
While the White House pushes Kyiv to reach a quick peace, Ukrainian President Zelensky remains hesitant, particularly over a US-backed peace plan seen as favourable to Moscow. Meanwhile, France, Germany and the UK are working on refining the peace proposals with a focus on security guarantees for Ukraine. Separately, Zelensky is set to meet with US officials today to discuss a draft peace plan and future reconstruction efforts. Joining us now is Colonel Sanjit Sirohi, an international relations and defence expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Colonel Sirohi, President Trump said European leaders had these pretty strong words to say on Ukraine. Obviously, Donald Trump saying positive things about them there. But how much weight do the Europeans really have in these negotiations in practice?
Well, Thomas, good morning. Now, this talk which has been going on for so long, and US has given a 28 program which was in favor of Russia, and which has been discussed by the European leaders, especially the British Prime Minister, France President, and Chancellor of Germany. They had discussed and they have come out with another plan which is about 25 program. But the point which is very, very important, there are 2 points which are going to create a problem, and that both the parties, they have agreed to it, that there are 2 problematic issues. First is the ceding of the territory to Russians, which I think Zelensky and all other European leaders are not in favor of doing that. And Zelensky has categorically mentioned that as per the international law and as per the constitution of Ukraine, they have got no right to cede the territory to Russians. So that is number 1 point. Number 2 is that the Europeans are more interested in taking the guarantee that Russia will not attack Ukraine or any other European country. So these are the 2 points which are going on. Now, Donald Trump has talked about, the one side he is talking about that he has a very good relationship with all the 3 leaders. On the other hand, he said that he has got a strong words. He has also mentioned that the life support, the Europeans and the Americans have relationship is on the life support, because every day they are not agreeing to it. So I think Donald Trump is pressurizing Zelensky and other European leaders to accept the demands of the Russians, which I think Zelensky and European leaders are not ready to do that. And to that extent, Zelensky is already speaking to about 30 leaders. Today, visual meeting is going to take place. And let's see what happens on that. And the European leaders have also invited President Trump on the weekend to come to Europe and discuss the new plan. So let us see how the things work out. Thomas.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, the big sticking point here is territorial concessions, something that Ukraine previously said it would never do, and now that seems to be on the table with this US peace plan proposing that Russia take control of even more of its occupied territory, and Ukraine cede that in an end to the war in exchange for some sort of NATO-style security guarantees. In regards to territory, of course, how do you think, in the broad scope of things, if Ukraine does cede territory, which could be seen as a kind of reward for Vladimir Putin's invasion, how would that feed in the long term, or in regards to international law?
Look, Thomas, the point is that these Ukrainians are fighting for last 4 years for their territory. And after 4 years, if Zelensky decides to give their territory, then the question the people are going to ask him was that why did you fight for 4 years? The country has been destroyed, totally devastated. Their infrastructure has been totally destroyed. Their energy sector has been destroyed. A lot of lakhs of people have been migrated. Then thousands of people have died. Thousands of soldiers have died. The casualties of the army have been very, very high. So if Zelensky had to cede the territory or he has to give this territory, Donbass complete territory to Russia, then why was he fighting for last 4 years? So I don't think any leader is going to accept that, and I don't think Zelensky is going to accept that, in spite of the fact that Mr. Donald Trump, for his own interest, for the interest of the Americans, is trying to pressurize Zelensky to cede their territory to Russia. That is totally incorrect, and I think the European leaders have to stay united and make sure that Ukrainians are not pressurized to give that territory to Russia. And the other point is that if the Russians, they don't get Donbass region in their control, then I think Mr. Donald Trump may try it, but I don't think that peace talks are going to take place or even the peace is going to take place. Thomas.
Okay, Colonel Sirohi, do stay with us as we have further updates. This time we move down to the ground. And Ukrainian naval drones have struck and disabled a sanctioned Russian tanker called Dashan in the Black Sea. Kiev Security Service says the vessel was operating as part of Russia's Shadow Fleet ships Moscow uses to quietly move oil and evade Western sanctions. The Dashan was moving at top speed with its transponders switched off when several drones hit its stern, causing critical damage. Maritime security sources and verified footage confirm the incident. This is Ukraine's third successful strike on a Shadow Fleet tanker in 2 weeks, as Kiev attempts to cut Russia's oil revenues that fund the war. Insurance costs for vessels in the region have surged as the conflict increasingly affects sea lanes. Russia has not responded yet, but President Vladimir Putin recently warned he may block Ukraine's access to the Black Sea following similar attacks. Ukraine has also targeted Russian refineries for months, but the tanker strikes mark a new phase in its campaign at sea. Colonel Sirohi, Ukraine has now hit 3 shadow fleets in the space of 2 weeks. What does that tell us about Kiev's strategy in the Black Sea?
Well, Thomas, we all know that the Russian economy is nowadays totally dependent on exporting of the oil products. So the Ukrainian, they feel that if they can strike the Russian oil fleets or the oil tankers, all the oil refineries, they will be able to stop to some extent the export of oil to the countries, especially China and India. So that is the stand, because they feel that their economy is working because of the oil export. So what the Ukrainians have decided is to strike the ports, strike the oil refineries, and strike the oil tankers. Now, these shadow fleet, which the Russians are using, they are using clandestine network of ships, which mostly are oil tankers. And to deceive the Ukrainians, they are switching off their transponders and they are falsifying their identity. So, as a result of which, it is very difficult to identify that which country's this tanker is. So, this is the third tanker, which, as you have also mentioned, that there is a third tanker which has been destroyed. And in spite of destroying these tankers, the Russians are now planning to block the Ukrainians in the Black Sea so that their movement is absolutely free. So this is the new type of strategy which the Ukrainians have formed. And this is basically because now if you see in since these peace talks have started, there has been more drones attacked by the Russians on the Ukraine, and Ukraine is similarly also trying to take as much advantage as possible so that both sides, when they come to negotiating table, they have something to negotiate for. So I think this is all going to, and all these activities are going to increase in future till the peace take place, and which is the question mark is, will the peace take place or no? Thomas.
Colonel Sirohi, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on, and US President Donald Trump has said that the United States has seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. This is the first known action against an oil tanker since Trump ordered a massive US military buildup in the region and carried out strikes against suspected drug vessels. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say about the operation.
It's been an interesting day from the standpoint of news. As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other.
Meanwhile, US Attorney Pam Bondi has also stated in a post on X that the United States had executed a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. In a statement, the Venezuelan government has accused the United States of blatant theft after the seizure of the oil tanker. The government has stated that it would defend its sovereignty, natural resources and national dignity with absolute determination. It has also added that it would denounce the seizure of the tanker before international bodies. Meanwhile, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has also demanded an end to US intervention in his country. Let's take a listen in.
Decimos no al intervencionismo, no a los planes de desestabilización de cambio de régimen. Allá el gobierno de Estados Unidos que se dediquen a gobernar su país.
Shruti Dasgupta joins us now. She's an international affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, always a pleasure to talk to you. What does this mean? What does the US hope to achieve here by seizing this oil tanker? Is it about sanctions or a show of force? What could it be?
Greetings, Thomas. Thank you so much for inviting me. What I understand is this is part of the latest published national security objectives of USA, which is a Trump corollary to what the Monroe Doctrine was, and it is a neo-imperialistic kind of view where USA is going to protect its interests in the Americas, that means the North and the South Americas. Hence, we've seen his intervention in Honduras, we've seen his intervention in Venezuela. This is part of their national policy now. Because they do not want to have an expanded China influence in the region or and they want to control the politics as well as the politicians of each of these nations. Beyond this, what does it hope to achieve? It is building pressure. What we know as independent analysts that Venezuela's crude oil is very heavy, and they generally transport it in an exchange supportive manner with the Iranian government, because they have lighter crude oil, and so they send their heavier one to them, take their lighter crude oil, and that makes the processing cheaper and more accessible for the Venezuelan nation. Sometimes there's also a gold for crude exchange that happens. So by targeting these ships, US is trying to ensure that Venezuelan government is under complete pressure economically also now. The ship was, they're using a lot of gray zone to ensure that they are still above sanctions or condemnation, though there is plenty coming their way. The ship was stateless. The ship is called Skipper, but it was earlier known as Addis, I believe, which was a sanctioned ship. And Venezuela has not been given an extension from the sanctions that has been put on its oil by USA since 2024, because the democratic elections that were held were under question, which re-elected Maduro into power. So there is a large amount of gray zone that they're using to show their military force and put pressure on Maduro and the people of Venezuela to overthrow him so that USA can then control the politics of the region.
Yes, and Shruti, what impact could this have on regional shipping? Of course, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. And so how will this affect geopolitical trade in regards to this?
Well, we've always said that putting pressure on Maduro in the name of drugs has always been about the Venezuelan oil, because that is the largest, as you've said, oil reserves in the world, even larger than Saudi Arabia. So if you control the politics of Venezuela, you control its oil, and you control who gets access to that particular gem, if I may call it as such. But what it shows the world is that USA is willing to break all sorts of polite political presentation and is using plain brute force. In fact, I believe an independent UN body has condemned how they have handled the so-called drug busts, where they killed about close to 80 people and destroyed ships. So the world is noticing that this is happening, but there is no way that they can control it. Independent nations, the smaller American nations, they are unable to fight it off themselves. They would need external support. So basically, it is either trigger a larger war in the waters around USA, or bow down to what USA wants and have a neo-colonial setup where you end up being a vassal state, an oil vassal state in case of Venezuela, to USA and its demands.
Yes, Shruti, do stay with us as we have further updates. The Swiss government announced that its agreement with the United States to reduce tariffs on Swiss imports to a maximum of 15% will apply retroactively to November the 14th. The deal, reached in November, cuts the tariff rate from 39%, which is what US President Donald Trump put in place back in August. Both countries can now request customs refunds dating back to the effective date. Swiss officials say the lower ceiling will reduce average trade-weighted US tariffs on Switzerland by roughly 10%, improving access to the American market for Swiss exporters. In return, Switzerland will lower tariffs on US fish, seafood, and select agricultural products, while also granting new duty-free quotas for beef, bison, and poultry. Switzerland has additionally pledged to invest about $200 billion in the United States by 2028, and the US will lift extra tariffs on several Swiss goods, including aircraft parts, rubber products, cosmetics, and generic medicines, with more under review. Shruti joins us once again. Shruti, how significant is this cut from 39% to 15% for Swiss exporters trying to get access to the United States market?
Well, the Swiss economy is very much an export-dependent economy, and the US tariffs had hurt it and its growth percentage, economic percentage, GDP percentage, a whole lot. It brought it down below 1% for the past year. So this is helpful because the average trade tariff percentage would somewhere become close to 10%, because there are some goods that because this is a tariff ceiling of 15%, not blanket tariff of 15%. So some goods may have tariff much lower also. So the average comes down to about 10%, which makes it very competitive in terms of UK as well as EU and even Canada. So Swiss exporters would have, this is good news for them, because now they are again in competition for US markets as such. But the other side of this entire deal is that Switzerland has promised to invest close to $200 billion by 2028 in USA to create American jobs in as you said, aircraft and pharmaceutical and other sectors. They have also promised the immediate by 2026 to invest about $67 billion. That is what is stated by the US website themselves. So there are clauses beyond it. I do not know how they will go forth with it, whether it will actually function or not. But the bottom line for USA is that no matter who gets to what is the tariff rate, the inflation in USA is up. I believe the Fed chair themselves have said that there's a 2% hike in inflation since the Trump government and its tariff regime. They're playing off one competitor against the other using tariff as a way to ensure that USA gets a better deal. The ultimate person who's paying the tariff is not the nation itself, it's the consumer, and that is the American consumer. So this may be good news for Switzerland, but bad news for Americans.
Yes, and Shruti Desgupta, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Venezuelan opposition figure Marina Cachina Machado has made her first public appearance in 11 months. She greeted supporters from a hotel balcony in Oslo, just hours after her daughter accepted the Nobel Prize on her behalf. Machado had been in hiding since January the 9th, when she briefly was detained after her protest against President Nicolas Maduro's inauguration in Caracas. She said in an audio message published by the Nobel Committee that she could not arrive in time for the ceremony, adding that many people had risked their lives to secure her travel to Norway. Her daughter, Ana Karina Sosa, accepted the award, saying Machado remains committed to a free Venezuela. Maduro himself emphasized, "Of course I'm going back," reaffirming her intention to return home soon. The Nobel Committee praised Machado's courage, calling Venezuela a brutal authoritarian state and urging Maduro to accept last year's election results and step down. Supportive Latin American leaders were also present in Oslo, underscoring international solidarity with her cause. We now move over to the United States, and President Donald Trump announces that his long-promised Gold Card program is officially launching, offering a fast track to the United States, legal residency and eventual citizenship for high-value investors. Individuals can qualify by investing $1 million, while corporations pay $2 million per foreign-born employee. Trump unveiled the program at the White House with a website now accepting applications. The initiative progress the EB-5 visa, aiming to attract top talent to the United States while generating revenue for federal coffers. Trump also said that all funds will go to the Treasury, supporting programs positive for the country. Unlike EB-5 visas, the Gold Card program does not specify job creation requirement or caps. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the process will thoroughly vet applicants and ensure that they can gain entry. Trump highlighted top graduates from China, India, and France as likely candidates, calling the Gold Card a much stronger path to U.S. citizenship. Okay, we have some breaking news coming in finally, and in a deadly escalation of a long-standing border conflict, 9 Thai soldiers have been killed and more than 120 others wounded in clashes with Cambodian forces this week. Thailand's Defence Ministry has reported the casualties, describing the situation as dire. The conflict, which reignited in recent days, has seen both sides engaged in fierce fighting along their shared border. The Thai ministry has vowed to continue its efforts, and tensions remain high in the region. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories coming out of the continent this hour. At least 22 people died when two four-storey residential buildings suddenly collapsed in Fez, Morocco, with 16 survivors pulled from the rubble overnight. Rescuers are still searching as neighbours urge inspections of other structures while authorities investigate the cause. Benin says Colonel Pascal Tigri, accused of leading a failed coup, has fled to neighbouring Togo and is being sought for immediate extradition. The dispute threatens to widen regional rifts as West Africa struggles to respond consistently to a wave of recent coups. Rwanda-backed M23 fighters have entered the strategic eastern Congo town of Uvira, marking the biggest escalation in months and opening a path for further advances. The move comes days after a Trump-brokered meeting with Congo and Rwanda now accusing each other of violations as Kinshasa urges Washington to expand sanctions. The US House Committee has approved a bill to renew the African Growth and Opportunity Act for 3 more years without any immediate move to exclude South Africa. The trade program, expired in September, provides duty-free access for sub-Saharan exports and supports hundreds of thousands of jobs. South Sudan's army has moved into the Heglig oil field under a rare deal with Sudan's warring factions to shield energy infrastructure from the civil war. The deployment follows the RSF's capture of the site on December the 8th, which forced SAF troops to retreat into South Sudan and surrender their weapons. The US will gather G20 officials next week to begin planning its 2026 presidency, but South Africa, the host this year, was not invited, sources say. Washington has barred South Africa from next year's events amid a bitter feud over President Trump's allegations against its government. Uganda will receive up to $1.7 billion in US health sector support over 5 years under Trump's America First global health strategy. The deal follows similar agreements with Kenya and Rwanda and pushes recipient nations to take greater responsibility for disease control and long-term self-reliance. Guinea-Bissau's military junta has approved a transactional charter barring the interim president and prime minister from contesting elections after last month's coup. The 12-month roadmap requires presidential and legislative votes at the end of the period, with the date set to be set by the transitional leader. We start this hour in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and M23 rebels have seized key areas in the strategic eastern area and Congo city of Uvira, located near the border with Burundi. The town has long been a military base for the Congolese army and was a headquarters of the South Kivu provincial government after the fall of Bukavu to M23 earlier this year. This marks a significant advance in the rebels' push through the mineral-rich region. The move comes just days after Congolese President Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Kagame met with US President Donald Trump to reaffirm their commitment to a peace deal. However, Rwanda denies backing M23, though both the US and the UN cite evidence of their involvement. Meanwhile, Burundi reports over 30,000 refugees fleeing because of the violence in the last 3 days. We're now joined by Major General Sadaka G. He is an international relations and defense expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General G, for joining us here on NewsX World. How significant is this development in the Democratic Republic of Congo? Of course, we saw hope in terms of a peace deal when it came to the meeting between the leaders of Rwanda and the DRC. However, on the ground, this does not seem to be coming to fruition, and the M23 rebels continue to gain ground. How significant is the M23's capture of parts of Ariva?
Thomas, good afternoon. Thank you for getting me for your show. And as regards the question which you have raised, it's very, I would say, very significant in relation to a couple of issues. First and foremost thing, that it is not happening for the first time. About a year back, the M23 forces had come into this area, and you find the reinforcement coming in post some kind of a truce or agreement has been signed by the leading stakeholders. But I must point out that there are some stakeholders, to the best of my understanding, who should have represented in the peace talk with Donald Trump. For example, M23 did not have any representative, to the best of my understanding. If they were there, well, I would like to withdraw my statement. And to say that M23 rebels are not being supported by Rwandan army is something which is not going to go down too well in the international scenario. It's a time-tested affiliation and affinity, and it is an accepted fact. Those of us who have traveled and been to this sector, they would bear me out that without the support of Rwandan army, M23 cannot sustain. Look at the weapon systems they use. And rebels are nothing but, I would say, an extension of the Rwandan army. And more than that, the third thing that comes to my mind, why is it happening so frequently, despite all agreements and all overtures and also serious intent and activities to bring peace? To my mind, I personally feel that, seeing the geography, Rwanda and Congo, Eastern Congo particularly, you see, Eastern Congo, the area to which the Rwandan army or the M23 rebels are invading, has got very strategic importance. The strategic importance actually is driven by the availability of very rare earth elements which are exclusive and which are very rare, actually rare, and very difficult to extract and mine them and also process and produce. This is one of the places where you have very exclusive quality and type of rare earth elements which are available. Plus, apart from the minerals, there are also other critical elements which are available, which are non-existent anywhere in the world. In the best of the places, Ukraine and Russia, they are also not available. So maybe this actually makes this particular region extremely strategically important, and therefore the M23 rebels, they are coming in basically to keep adding on to the kitty as an additional resource and revenue. And the same money goes for funding the Rwandan army. Surprisingly, this is a network, this is a nexus which is prevailing for quite some time. And apart from this, there are also issues related to cattle and the agricultural land, and there is an inter-tribal rivalry which has been going on post 1994, when there was a huge genocide or massacre. Lakhs of people died during that time.
Yes.
Post that incident, this somehow peace has been eluding in this area. And I personally feel it is not difficult, provided the relevant stakeholders are called for the peace meeting and they are consulted and they are made to participate in such kind of deliberations. Back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, and what do you think we can expect next? Further advances from these M23 rebels? Complete political collapse of possibly the DRC government, or a push for emergency negotiations, or even possible international intervention here?
Yes, international interventions. We already have United Nations force, and the United Nations force is empowered with